Good afternoon. I don't know if you can hear me.
Dr. Fred,
How you doing, brother?
can you see me?
I can see you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Great. Let's kick off and thanks for hanging in there. I had some blips on the screen in terms of signing in.
Yep.
Um, but what did we do before Alexander Graham Bell, right? I guess we used the talking drums. Always fascinates me how looking at communication history, how did people communicate over the centuries
Yeah.
and still write a Bible or write an Old Testament, New Testament, still pass along the message, still David Walker's appeal, sending stuff on the trains and the boats and
Mm-hmm.
the newspapers. Let's kick off. Earl Bloodworth might join us. Earl attended the Yale Innovation Summit last week, and
Okay.
I asked him to perhaps share some anecdotes from his standpoint. I'm not sure if he attended both days or just one day, but and then thinking about your recent posts and your recent travels to the Caribbean and Carolina and who knows where else that have
Right.
to look at your FBI file to really determine where where you go or whether you got an ankle bracelet on. You talked about some fascinating things recently about people's economic choice from a location and casting down their buckets where they should be, if I can use that phrase.
Yep.
So we can jump in there, or we could just talk about your Caribbean um, proposal, your presentation, or just where you are with life at the moment. I guess before I let you go, Dr. Fred, when I let you, before I end my soliloquy, I guess when I share on a personal standpoint, you're one of the few people that I know that have worn those five finger shoes.
Oh. Yeah.
And
I still have a couple of pairs of them and
and
still wear them occasionally.
and I have a few as well. So we share that bond about, I guess, idiosyncrasies or just exploring new ways of identifying with survival. But let's jump in. What's on your heart, mind, and soul today? And as I say, and Earl Bloodworth might be joining us.
Well, first of all, thank you, Tom, for having me on the program today. There's a lot on my mind, and most recently, I did a post yesterday, in fact, after I read a piece in NPR on an appeals court ruling down in Georgia that ruled against the Fearless Fund, which is
Mm-hmm.
an organization of Black women for Black women entrepreneurs. And these were Black women who saw the problem. This touches on our issue of Black business. Saw one of the main problems facing Black businesses is lack of access to capital. And so this organization, the Fearless Fund, was organized to assist Black women entrepreneurs by providing them grants so that they could get started, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually those first dollars that are the hardest to come by because those are the riskiest dollars. And I'll talk a little bit about Jamaica and my business ventures down in Jamaica as well and their connection to the United States. But this is not just a US problem. This is a problem for Africans all over the continent, all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of getting the capital they need to start their businesses. But in this case in Georgia, this appeals court uh, was basically hearing a case brought against the Fearless Fund by the same guy. His name is Edward Bloom, who started the organization about fairness for students. I forgot the acronym, but they're the group that sued Harvard and the University of North Carolina successfully to get Harvard and the University of North Carolina to change their admissions programs.
That's right.
And that cascaded across all of American universities who are still in the process of reevaluating their commitments to diversity on campus, diversity of students, diversity of faculty, diversity of staff. And this has put had a chilling effect on universities. And I wrote back in August of last year, after that Harvard case, that this guy, Ed Blum, and his groups that are well funded by essentially racist money, that have on their primary agenda and primary motive is to do as much damage as they can to Black folk.
Yes.
And that's the bottom line. They just are hurting Black folk. That's what their mission is. And so he turned his attention to this Fearless Fund, and 2 out of the 3 judges agreed with him.
Yes.
That the Fearless Fund, by trying to help Black women entrepreneurs, was discriminating against Jews, whites, and Asians.
Yes.
So, give me a break. What is this all about? This is all about, again, there are folks who want to do harm and damage to Black folks regardless of where they are or what they're doing. I hope that this case is not done, but let's face the reality of what we're looking at. So this is an appeals court that ruled. The next step would be a Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Do we have any hope of a case being adjudicated in the favor of Black people in this Supreme Court? I don't think so. So, my piece was that my article yesterday basically said that we have to think about different tactics and strategies now. We've been under attack by these groups for literally for decades, ever since the Civil Rights Bill was passed. Mm-hmm. So, my piece basically says that we should go after some of these groups, their groups, Jewish groups, Asian groups, white American ethnic groups. And there are dozens of them, a lot more than there are groups in the Black community whose mission is to help members of their community.
Yes.
Exclusively. And if there's any hint of public dollars, and even if there aren't any hints of public dollars, we should go after them and say they're discriminating. And we got to fight fire with fire. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I think it's not to be vengeful, but it's to change the narrative and get people to stop attacking our institutions and our people. Mm-hmm. Because we can't just sit around and say, oh, that's terrible. We can't, you shouldn't do that. You gotta fight back. And that's where I think we are in this country. We have to, again, learn from our ancestors that we don't have to take this. And so that's one of the things that's really troubling me, because that's at the intersection of politics, race, and business. And a related piece that I wrote recently was all about the coming up on the anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education. And I wrote that, this was a landmark case. It was phenomenal, had, tremendous impact on millions of Black people. But I seriously doubt whether or not the goals of Brown Board of Education can solve the problems of Black folks in low to moderate income Black communities. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote about the limits of integration, and basically, you follow these thoughts down. For some it's a rabbit hole, but what does it tell us? It tells us if integration is not, it works great for me. I mean, I attended UCLA and Yale University, and as a result of that, I had opportunities that I was afforded. But if you don't have those opportunities, what are you facing? What are your life chances?
Mm-hmm.
Your life chances are you're probably going to end up spending most of your life where you were born and where you went to school and where you lived. You know, you might leave, but chances are you're going to leave to another community that looks very much like the community you left. And so I have doubts about the role of integration helping low and moderate income Black Americans in predominantly Black communities across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so that says, well, what do you do if integration is not the solution? You know, there are 46 million, at least 46 million Africans here in the United States. They're not all going back to Africa. They're going to be here. So how do we help the majority of those 46 million Africans achieve their human potential in a society that is hell-bent to step on their necks? And so my thoughts are that we've got to shore up, we got to build these communities from the ground up. And that means that the solutions that we have been seeking they're not working. And so I'm exploring, you know, other types of solutions that, again, in our history, our ancestors, we come from greatness. We have, you know, we built empires and civilizations long before the Greeks, the Romans, the Europeans. All of these people came after us. Mm-hmm. Well, how do we build those civilizations? How do we build those societies so that they were the dominant societies in the world? And I think there are some strong lessons here, and we can use them. It's not just history, it's living history. And so some of those lessons tell us that we got to get organized. And we have to organize our communities around the interest of our communities. And, you know, it's not easy, but that's where leadership comes. You know, we gotta tell a different story. We got to take control of our communities. And so that really speaks to, well, who's living in our communities. And we've got to, you know, make the commitment to our communities and to ourselves.
And you've made a suggestion about some folks pulling up stakes in one place and moving to another zip code. Perhaps share a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, so if you look at sort of the trajectory of America and Africans in America since Brown versus Board of Education and all of its implications, you know, and I'm part of that. You get access to education, you get a good job, you start a family, you may start in the community where you lived. I mean, when I came to New Haven, I was living over in right off of in the Hill section. And so, you know, it's because of what I could afford. I had $300 a month in income when I was at Yale, and that was it. And so I had to find a place, and my rent costs $170. That's not going to put me up in what they call high cotton. And so, you know, you can afford what you can afford. But when you get that job, when you start establishing stakes, what do? You move out of those communities. And this is the reality. I'm not sugarcoating it. I live in a white community right now, predominantly white community. Those were the options for my families and my children's education. That's what I was looking at. But what I'm saying is, and I don't have a lot of regrets of the decisions that I made in my life, but I think if I would have to do it all over again, what would I like to have done? I would have liked to have moved into stayed in our Black community, not moved into it, stayed in that community, helped develop that community, help recruit other successful Blacks with resources to stay in these communities. And now we're talking about really, you know, we use the term gentrification almost as a pejorative. But I think what I'm talking about is Black gentrification of Black communities. And in fact, this is some history here as well. As you know, You know, if you look at pre Brown v. Board of Education, you had countless Black communities in this country that were economically diverse. And what we have now is we don't have that economic diversity within Black communities. And so what I'm arguing for is some economic diversity, a return to some economic diversity in these communities. Because what happens if you don't have economic diversity? You don't have Black business. You don't have successful Black business. Business needs customers. Customers need income. Income needs either jobs or business. So there's a cycle here. And when you extract the folks with resources out of those communities because they make other choices, what you've done is you've left a low-income community to essentially fend for itself. And it's almost impossible for those types of communities to develop in the ways that make sense. And you know, it's real. So if you go to a lot of Black communities around this country, it's hard to find plumbers, electricians, Black folks that are doing this. You know, construction companies. Yeah, we have them. We have a few, but we don't have we don't have enough of them. And we don't have the ones that are of scale. And, you know, and I was looking at some numbers just recently. And I was looking at all the plumbers, like just take any, you know, and I just randomly picked the plumbers. If you look at, you know, plumbers in America, there are, you know, thousands of plumbers in America, licensed plumbers. But if you look at a large numbers of Black communities around the country, we don't have our share of Black plumbers. We don't have our share of Black electricians. We don't have our share of a whole bunch of other trades and professions. And it's because, you know, these communities are not organized. So what if you had a community like New Haven, and I did the numbers, and it was like if you have a community of 15,000 people, that community, based on national numbers, should be able to adequately support 20 plumbers. Okay, so you look at a community with 150,000, you know, Black folks, you should have 200 plumbers in that community to satisfy the needs of that community. That's based on national numbers. Well, if we don't have enough plumbers in New Haven and our communities, why can't the community leadership come together and say, hey, look, we got these trade schools and they're putting out all these people. Where are they? What happens to them? Let's train, you know, the plumbers that we need for this community, and let's support them. So if we need some plumbing services, these are the folks that we're going to. And if we need, same thing with electrical services, the same thing with all the other services that we need. That's how you systematically start to build businesses. Right now, we rely on other folks to take care of us. That's not a sustainable, desirable solution to our problems.
Dr. Fred, I've asked, I see Arden Santana is with us, and Arden, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And I believe Earl Budworth is here with us as well. And I asked Earl and Arden to attend us, a kind of segue in terms of what you had positioned in terms of the historical background and the current dilemma. But Arden and Earl attended the Yale Innovation Summit last week at the School of Management. And I was interested to kind of have them perhaps share a little bit of their vision and dreams and just what occurred to them, what some of their takeaways there in terms of we can talk about imagination and innovation, but when it gets to implementation, as you've indicated, that's an organizational thing. So I was just asking them to share a little bit for our audience, what kind of how the spirit might have inspired them last week, kind of visions they've had, and also to put out a shout out to how we can kind of support whatever dreams or visions or actions they might want to be taking individually and or collectively moving forward. Arden, let's hear from you, and glad you could join us. I know you had a busy day, so glad you're able to kind of sneak away for a few minutes.
Thank you. I have my partner too, Hafiza Teray. I said, come in if you can. I don't know where I'll be able to fit in, so she may pop in case we have to, sort of share
Excellent.
responsibility.
More the merrier.
So jumped in listening to Fred, and from what I could hear, great segue, Tom, because those are the things I'm thinking about as I'm listening to him. What else is needed? And outside of the leadership, guiding us toward a collective effort in providing the resources and services needed within the community. What's also missing, and what the Elements of Abundance, that's the organization that I am a part of and who attended the summit, actually to pitch an idea that is connected to our mission, which is basically to connect all of the issue is the fragmentation. There's a great deal of work and effort going on from what I can see in the community, but it's happening in silos where the leaders of the silos, and I think that's another issue. We don't need to have leaders. We need to have cooperatives and coalitions and collectives who are working together, which that's a whole nother layer of safety and another conversation. But just looking differently at the way leadership is thought of and how it is that our movements and our efforts can be sustainable. So what's happening is all the work and effort happening in silos where the organizational leaders are not communicating together and collaborating enough about what is being done. So we're not seeing the impact of it. So the way that the summit motivated me was a couple of things, particularly it was just in the way of AI. My capacity as an educator, I'm also the founder of Sage Academy, which is an independent alternative to traditional school settings here in New Haven County, I'll say, even though we don't operate on the county system, but we're still New Haven County located. So in that regard, it was the ethics and usability in education and AI where most of my inspiration came from. But it was in alignment with what needs to happen. I attended to stay abreast, if this is one of the leading education institutions in our country, very large footprint on New Haven. So if nothing else, it was there to be able to stay in tune with, what is innovative in these spaces and who's leading the innovation. So in that regard, it was in alignment with where we already are in terms of our missions and what we seek to do with the New Haven community, beginning first and foremost with Dixwell and Newhallville, the neighborhoods we were born and raised in, and being able to take what we develop here and bring to a point of mastery and sustainability and branch those out to the different neighborhoods, because we don't have communities, we have neighborhoods. So we're attempting to build community through collaboration and getting the leaders and the workers and the movers and shakers to come sit at the same table and begin to share the work and begin to, consciousness is shifting. So this idea around what Black communities and Black neighborhoods need and who wants to do the work and put forth the effort, it's there. Everyone's there, but we're not at the table. And if we are, we're not there at the same time. So I'm motivated and inspired to come in and help bring the people to the table together at one time and then begin to plan from that space.
Indeed. And did you mention, Arden, that Hafiza, one of your running buddies, is there as well?
She
might pop in. Okay.
She may pop in, yes.
Might pop in.
Yeah.
And Earl, I can't see you, but are you still on the call? Brother.
Can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, and thank you guys for having me. And Tom, as always, thanks for the platform. Listening to both what Arden said and the other gentleman, was coming in on the back end, but I'm not sure if he was referring to the lawsuit that had been brought against some venture capitalist Black women that said it was racist for them to provide funding only for Black women businesses, which I think is preposterous. But even beyond that, what you're asking about with the innovation conference that happened, I believe, it was a 2-day conference. I was only able to attend the second day. I got to see Arden and her agency and organization, the Elements, in their elements, so to speak, discussing how to be more collaborative between not only, the leaders and organizations in New Haven, but across the diaspora all the way to Ghana. And I thought that was rather impressive. But I wanted to focus in on one of the things that your other guest was talking about, and his possible one regret of not staying in the Black community and moving out based on the needs of his children and their education. I find myself as being one of those individuals that stayed in my neighborhood, in my community, depending on how you feel about those two terminologies. And I know quite a bit of leaders in the community, people, doctors, lawyers, plumbers, but I would agree that it's not the same as it was pre-integration. Pre-integration, everybody lived close-knit. We needed each other. We depended on each other. Our dollars circulated more amongst each other, and that's not the case as it is today. And there's a huge gap in the lack of leadership and organization. And even though, as Arden said, there are agencies and organizations doing good work towards the betterment of the neighborhoods and the communities, there's not a centralized philosophy that's knitting everything together. People are in silos, and we don't necessarily have what we had, in my estimation, and what I've read and learned. We don't have what we had pre-integration. We don't necessarily depend on each other, and we have a lot of folks like the good doctor. And congratulations, kudos to you being one of the first, Black to get your economic PhD, I believe, from Yale. But we have a lot of folks that have moved out of the neighborhoods that we all still reside in. And as you said, even if you do find yourself moving out, you tend to gravitate back into a community that seems familiar to you for the most part. And it's a detriment. We had a lot of loss of knowledge, a lot of loss of leadership, either by attrition or by murder or by imprisonment. So I think that impacts us. But in the discussion of the Innovation Summit, I thought it was an amazing thing. I myself find myself in the transition, leaving a position, working in a municipality and trying to figure out stuff on my own and starting a consulting business and working towards still representing the population that I work with, those that have been incarcerated or impacted by the United States criminal legal system, and making sure that they have a seat at the table. I wish there were more folks from that community that have been involved and invited into that space, not just for the possible connectivity to dollars or venture capitalism, but I was quite inspired by some of the panelists I heard. I found myself, like I said, at a crossroads and kind of doubting myself and my skills. And I heard this one lady talk. She's like, "You are exactly, you're in those situations where a person is talking to the whole crowd, but you feel as what they say is resonating with you personally, and they're speaking directly to you. That I find myself in this moment of ultimate possibility, and I need to not be afraid to get out of my comfort zone. And I'm exactly where I need to be to get that lift off velocity." And I felt that a lot more of the community should have been involved and connected to this opportunity. I know it's every year, but there are some, boundaries that exist if you don't know who to talk to, because the tickets to get in there were $495. Luckily, I had a great friend that, provided me a discount code where I didn't have that to pay, and two, I couldn't have paid it. So, and I didn't have to pay it because I had the discount code. I just feel that these opportunities, like having Yale, which, growing up, how I grew up in New Haven, initially disliking and discounting Yale's impact on my life, but Yale is a gift and a curse. And they do a lot in the community, in the neighborhoods? Yes, but could they ultimately be doing a lot more? Absolutely.
Earl, thank you so much. Hafeeza, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. Dr. Fred, I think you'll be intrigued to hear Arden and Hafeeza. I want to kind of ask you to elaborate on your several Ghana visits and your economic development efforts there and on arts and culture. And I think, Dr. Fred, you'll be really intrigued to hear what these young queens have been up to and accomplishing from a real estate and investment standpoint, et cetera. So if you don't mind, Dr. Fred, I want to give them maybe 10, even as much as 10 minutes, just so you can hear, because in terms of your expertise globally, they may need to connect with someone that has your experience. Arden, perhaps, and Hafeeza, why don't you guys kind of jump off and provide that context, because it's really important.
So Hafeeza, you want to come in? I've spoken. So just to kind of connect it all, we presented. I'll open it up for us and then let Hafiza go into the specifics of the international piece. We enter into the e-pitch opportunity through the venture to be able to present what's called the exchange. The exchange is the project by ourselves, the Elements of Abundance, which is addressing the problem that exists in terms of the people of the African diaspora being able to have international travel experiences, where one, they feel that they understand they can afford it because we're spending $63 billion a year traveling. But second, that we feel that we belong in the places we travel. We don't see ourselves represented in, media and advertisement in terms of travel. So feeling like we belong where we do. So it's a membership association that we are building that has a two-part component, a physical brick and mortar membership with the option of virtual and augmented reality experiences to be able to allow membership across all economic strata. So this all originated with Hafiza's initial visit to Ghana, which expanded into ultimately 3 visits thus far. And I was able to attend the third one with her. And I think this is a good segue for her to just elaborate on our project.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for this platform. We truly appreciate, the support, and absolutely all about collaboration and seeking guidance. I think that's significant in this. So yes, we have been the last 12 months. I spent 3 months in Ghana. It was real estate that brought me there, but the first visit is really what was so transformative for me, and I felt like it was something that I needed to kind of scream from the rooftops and definitely bring the people that I truly care about into this experience. And I think it's hard to put into words, and we say that a lot, but it's the limitless possibilities that were experienced in the space. It was the opportunity to see in real time people creating phenomenal things. The creativity, the innovation, and the desire to connect. It was definitely the feeling of being welcomed and not tolerated. And people were hungry to understand and know what it is we're doing, what's going on over here. What is life like? Just even, not even from a economic development standpoint, but just on a day-to-day basis. But also, there were so many opportunities to collaborate and grow together. Natural resources, human capital, all of those things that I saw were just vast and available, and at a level and a caliber that was like so beneficial to the things that we needed and we're doing here. So it was beyond a party. It was beyond just traveling and going abroad. It was the idea that community could be established and meaningful connections could be established. And I knew that, the elements and the circle that I was around would appreciate that. And as soon as we began talking and brainstorming about what this would look like and how is it that we can make these connections, a lot of what has come out of it is manifesting in the tours, in the summit that we had here, in the relationships that we're building, not just in the creative community, but in the community at large here in New Haven. So yes, the exchange was born out of that idea. The Innovation Summit gave us a platform and the motivation to really put something concrete together that we could then begin sharing with people and, galvanize folks behind us to support in making this a reality. The tours coming up, understanding how expansive travel is. It's more than just going on a trip. It's seeing the world and seeing yourself in, a larger space. It's how that impacts how creative and innovative we become just from seeing how things are done in different ways and being in a different environment. So wanting and also understanding how that can add value to our community here at home. When we have these experiences, when we go abroad, when we bond and connect with each other and others outside of our community, and then bring that back here, the limitless possibilities of what we can create here at home as well. So how do we bridge that gap and make those connections, and understanding that, there are those who have, been doing this work and can add value to even our perspective of how we're looking at this, and the importance of the youth as well, and how we can expose them to a reality that, they might not otherwise know of.
But Hafiza, I mean, share, I shouldn't say but, and really appreciate that context, how folks can get in touch with you. And I believe you're still are providing these investment options, not only in Ghana, but also in the Dominican Republic. So to take, you got another minute or so to kind of get this commercial out.
Well, thank you. Well, from that standpoint, yes, it was international real estate that brought us into this space and really expanded into what it is now. So yes, there are opportunities in the Dominican Republic. Mexico is also a space that we're in. But Ghana is where I am the ambassador of that jurisdiction for the investment group that I'm a part of. There's 275 primarily Black women who are investing in international real estate, and I have the privilege of being one of the connectors in Ghana for that group. So we do have opportunities, especially for those who are interested in investing but may not be able to access it at the price point of, owning a property there. Outside of the United States, most of these countries are cash-based systems, so there's no financing available, and you do have to have capital. But with collective economics, we can come together and pool our resources and have access to these opportunities. These are significant emerging markets. Ghana is definitely trending right now. The real estate is booming. So to be able to tap in right now, 10 years from now, it's going to be a significant impact from a return on investment standpoint. So
Can
definitely.
you jump in, Hafiz, and say that the way they could tap in though is in October is our first tour, the Connect and Build tour, which will allow guests to be able to visit Ghana in that space that is to attend the tour, which is curated exactly for innovatives, business owners. If you're looking to invest in, live in, expatriate, otherwise invest in and build your wealth portfolio through international real estate or other business ventures. You'll have the opportunity to have a curated experience in that space through the October tour. The dates are the 7th
17th through the 25th of October.
And how do they reach you guys? How do they give us some contact information?
Absolutely.
info@theelements.world by email.
Yes.
Phone number 203-902-5150. Actually, scratch that because I believe we are now working with a 1-800 number. So we'll go with info@theelements.world for email, and our website is theelements.world. And we will definitely send an email to express your interest or just opt in for information through the website, which is theelements.world. We're curating, we're finishing up the final touches of all the details for the tour so people can have that information when they access the website or otherwise get a link from us that will have details of all available tours, the dates, your lodging options, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Fred, just before I come back to you, Arden, I want you to share a little bit for Dr. Fred about the SAGE Academy as well, because I know Dr. Fred will want to comment on the international exposure, the boots on the ground, but also the education, the importance of education, and the mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Absolutely. And really quickly, before I get into that, Dr. Fred, I just want to respond to something Earl mentioned about not having a centralized, I think, framework within to do the work that we're speaking of in terms of cooperative economics and collective effort. And I just want to mention that the summit that our nonprofit hosted, Communities for Generations Incorporated, recently on September 13th, or April 13th. That was for the purpose of actually introducing a plan, a framework in which the communities can work within that could be this blueprint or this centralized location. So I would love to love to be able to meet with you outside of this call to be able to just elaborate on that. That's part of what we want to insinuate into this space, that we have a framework to be able to do this work in. In terms of my school, I am a recovering public school teacher, originally having begun my career in Prince George's County, Maryland. And then I became a mom. And as a mom, it was, now I'm forced with the decision myself about where would I send my children to school. So my decision was to homeschool them, which I'd done for the majority of their school career. They're only in 6th grade at this point. But for the majority of the time, I homeschooled them with the exception of 2 years where I did opt to send them to private school. And in the midst of prior to the schooling, I opened a daycare because that allowed me to continue to be a mom and contribute economically to my household and maintain some of my own independence in that regard. And what that evolved into was me still continuing to homeschool my children after I relocated to Philadelphia. And this was pre-COVID. COVID hits and the school closings and, us being able to see the mediocrity of the current system, as reported in that, 1983 report coming out from the Department of Ed about its own mediocrity. The covers were pulled off of that. So parents are reaching out in this space of, I need help. My child was an A and B student, but I'm looking at this essay. It doesn't, I don't understand how they're an A and B student. They're not understanding concepts and teachers are not responding to the calls or the Zoom. I have parents, their children are crying on Zoom. And I just kept saying, send them to me, send them to me. So now the children can socialize, although it was still online because I was out of state at this point. The issue with what happened with Sage was not that everyone had to go on school online. It was that teachers weren't trained properly in how to teach in this digital space, all right? They weren't trained to teach in this digital space. I'd taken that time to learn how to engage students in digital spaces with interactive learning platforms, so on and so forth. So I ended up with an online school. And when I returned home to Connecticut, which was just an indication that it was time for me to give back to where I'm from, that has evolved into a brick and mortar physical school building, operating in the way that we did prior to public education, which was in that, sort of single space, one room setting, educational setting with all grades helping each other out. We're a tuition-based school that pretty much operates in that window. I cater to parents who want to homeschool but can't. And as a recovering public school teacher, I'm able to blend that homeschool pedagogy with that of traditional schooling to create an alternative for students who would benefit from a smaller environment, who want a culturally relevant space, and where their learning is led by the students themselves. So that SAGE Academy, the acronym stands for Science, Arts, History, Government, and Economics. I was also responding to information I received from the nation's report card, where I learned that less than 25% of our nation's 8th graders are proficient in civic literacy. And that was striking to me when all of the mission statements in the schools in Connecticut, including the one I graduated from, they say we're going to graduate productive citizens and contributors to society. And I'm saying, how are we going to do that when we don't even assess their civic knowledge in 12th grade? But that's when they're becoming adults entering the world and supposed to engage civically, and they don't know how. So we're a civic preparatory school that also incorporates the arts enrichment because we understand the power of arts, especially for children of color, and how that increases their academic performance.
Excellent.
Well, that's
Dr. Fred, I know you've got a mouthful, so
Yeah.
but I want to give you a theme as you begin from King Tut to Tuck, from King Tut to Tuck. He'll explain what that means.
Nice.
Also, he recently spoke in one of the Caribbean countries in terms of economic development, and obviously has been involved with education for 50 years. So, Dr. Fred, take it away, and Earl, I'll give you a chance to comment as well.
Well, first of all, thank you for those introductions. And one of the things I want to say right off the bat is, if you ever would like for me to come and speak to your kids, I am available at no charge to your kids, you and your
Thank
kids.
you, children, because they would tell you kids are goats.
The kids are goats. For your
Come to
children.
the children.
Yep, I am there for them. So just let me know when and where. I also have had some experiences on the continent. I've been to Ghana a couple of times. It's been a while since I was last there. I first went in 1981. But I've also traveled to Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Nigeria briefly. So I applaud what you're doing. If I had my choices, I'd probably be there now.
Likewise.
I have a deep love for the continent.
Mhm.
I also have a deep love for Africans here in the United States, and I think there's work to be done here, work that we can work. It's not mutually exclusive. We can do both. So as Tom mentioned, I was recently in Jamaica, and I was asked to come down to Jamaica by the Jamaican Development Bank, which, you know, it's one of the things that happens. You know, you guys are not there yet, but when you get a little older, you know, Tom and I are probably about the same vintage.
His wine is sweeter though than mine.
Huh?
Yes,
But
you're more, you have more sweet wine. I'm more like vinegar, but continue.
I don't know about that. But
Okay, all
one of my students is now an executive at the Jamaican Development Bank. And so she was a student of mine when I was on the faculty at the University of Connecticut back in the 80s and 90s. So so she's there, and we basically just kind of luckily ran back into each other, and I told her what I was doing, and I had just come back from Jamaica when we spoke, and she told me about an event that they were having about entrepreneurship, and it was going to take place in Kingston. And so I told her that I'd be happy to do that. And since that time, I'm also helping the bank evaluate proposals, entrepreneurial support proposals from organizations in Jamaica, in Kingston primarily, that their mission is to help local entrepreneurs. So I've been getting more and more involved with the, you know, entrepreneurs in Kingston, in Jamaica. And like I said earlier, you know, we're experiencing the same issues all over the world. You know, there's some of this, you know, it's not exactly the same. You know, we're talking about different countries, different cultures slightly, but some of the fundamental problems are still there. So I have an interest. I owned a company starting in 19 when was that? Probably 79, 80. We started a coffee company in New Haven. So I had a company called Jamaican Gourmet Coffee. The company still exists. I'm not involved with it, but the owner is a close friend of mine. He was actually at my house on Sunday. So we still are in touch. He still is doing coffee, and I've been down there several times to visit with him. And on one of my recent visits to his place, he introduced me to an entrepreneur, a Rastafarian, who is trying to get a natural juice company off the ground in Jamaica. And so I thought it was interesting. I thought he was a type of entrepreneur that I would want to help. And so I've begun helping him really get his ducks in a row so that eventually he can sell, you know, first to customers, clients, both individual consumers and companies in Jamaica. And so one of the things that I shared with my former student at the Jamaican Development Bank is some of the things you guys are talking about, which is really the lack of connections. And business is about connections. And so, you know, I spent 15 years as president of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council, which was an organization that connects large corporations to, quote, minority-owned and certified businesses. Well, I still know a lot of those companies and a lot of the people who work in those companies. So just today, for instance, I had a conversation with a contact friend of mine who is a supplier diversity person at Hilton. And so what I'm trying to get her to do is say, hey, look, I want to come back to Jamaica with a group of Black businesses in the United States who, everything is relative. From a Jamaican perspective, are wealthy. I mean, if you got $25,000 in the bank here in this country, that's not a lot of money, but that's a lot of money in Jamaica. And so, you know, I'm not saying you put all your money in Jamaica, just like you're saying not put all your money in Ghana. But there are opportunities that can connect our people together in ways that benefit everybody in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what I'm working on. Now, I'm also trying to write this up in a book form. And I'm calling the book Rasta Economics.
Hmm.
Because like I said, I'm working with some Rastas down in Jamaica. There are Rastas up here. There are Rastas all over the world, whether they know they're Rastas or not.
And it's absolutely a different economy. It
It's a
is.
different economy.
I'm interested. Like,
Dr. Fred, Arden and Hafiza and Earl, in addition to all the various titles and objectives they have, they're certainly entrepreneurs. Share
Right.
with them a little bit about your experience at Tuck at the business school there.
Sure.
They may want to, I'm assuming the program is still in operation.
It is. And, so after I spent, like I said, I spent 15 years at the council, Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council, and I left the council in 2015 to pursue an opportunity that was presented to me by Dartmouth's Tuck School of Business. And they asked me to come up to run an executive education program at the Tuck School of Business. And one of the programs that I was responsible for was a intensive 1-week training program for Black and Brown entrepreneurs. And so I was responsible for that curriculum, the recruitment of students, the working with corporations who would support those students. And I did that for 3 years. And that program still exists up at Tuck. I'm not involved with it anymore because I left in 2018 to take a position at Quinnipiac University because of one of my good friends who you guys probably know of, and who's Carl Highsmith. Carl was a business owner in the council when I was at the council. So we got to meet, that was going back to 2001. We met and became friends. And Carl was a trustee at Quinnipiac, and he had funded a chair in entrepreneurship at Quinnipiac. And I was at Dartmouth, and Carl asked me if I'd be interested in coming back to Connecticut. And I, a lot of life is who you're talking to, as I mentioned, or who's asking. And, so because of the relationship and my respect for him, I said, yes, I'll take that position. And I came down and worked at Quinnipiac till 2021. And Arden, like you, when the pandemic hit, I decided I don't want to do this. I'm not a Zoom teacher. It didn't work for me. So I said, I got it. I'm out of here. I stopped. And so after 2021, I decided to just spend full time doing my consulting practice, which I had started back in 1999. So I've been doing consulting for 25 years, and all during that time. But I'm here. I've seen a lot. I've learned a lot about entrepreneurship, particularly Black and Brown entrepreneurship. I think I see what some of the needs are, and it gets back to some of the earlier conversation about the need to build community. We often think about, having more businesses will help the community. It's the other way around. You got to build the community. If you build the community, the businesses will come to support that community. And that community needs to be economically diverse. So that's kind of the gist of the book that I'm working on right now. And I'm trying to be disciplined enough to spend an hour a day writing on it. And so that I'll hopefully be done sometime at the end of the summer.
We have about 5 minutes, everybody, or 5 to 6 minutes. I'll be sure that everybody has the respective contact information. Earl, I want to kind of give you a chance to, Brother Bloodworth is also, or you're still studying for your LSATs, something you're working on.
Yeah, I'm studying for my LSATs. I'm along with Arden and cohort. We're accessed as law school fellows at Yale through a program through the Law and Racial Justice Center and Professor James Foreman. So that is one of the things that I'm primarily focused on, having since resigned from my position as director of the Mayor's Initiative for Reentry Affairs. But I do also want to discuss briefly in this discussion around building the community to make sure that everybody's involved. Connecticut had roughly 20,000 folks incarcerated around 2015, 2014. That number has since dwindled down to roughly 9 to 10,000 folks. And so a lot of those folks are back here in the community. And as Brother McKinney said, you not only need individuals in the communities that have jobs and income, you know, in order to support these businesses. Well, if we have these brothers and sisters that are coming from incarceration and serve their time, they're still not full citizens in our community. They're not fully integrated because they can't get livable wage jobs or safe place to live. And I'm a firm believer that, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. So if we're helping this particular segment of the population regarding housing and employment, we're going to help the entire population of our neighborhoods and our communities. And so you have these folks that are left out and in some cases have to revert back to their survival tactics that got them in trouble in the first place. We have laws in the book now that says that certain offenses should be automatically expunged, and that law was passed. The Clean Slate legislation was passed in 2021 and was supposed to be implemented and enacted fully in 2023 January, and it has not thus far been active based on some issues in the administration and our state government. And then it was supposed to be fully implemented in 2024. Now, thus far, it has automatically expunged around 13,000 folks' records that meet the criteria for automatic expungement. But there are over 100,000 open positions in the state of Connecticut right now. And this law that was passed in 2021, which is not yet fully active and implemented, has the possibility to expunge the records of almost 120,000 more people. So that's a whole workforce right there that could be utilized in our communities. Or in fact, you know, as I said, invited to the table for these opportunities in entrepreneurship, because a lot of these folks have skills, but they've been kind of blacklisted or scarlet lettered out of the community, along with also the pardon process. There's going to be a Connecticut Pardons Day taking place on June 18th during the week of Juneteenth, where folks are going providing 6 simultaneous workshops and clinics throughout the state from 12 to 3, where the workshop portion will be helping people understand what a full pardon is if you're not eligible for the Clean Slate legislation, and then also starting folks on their process and journey for seeking a full pardon, which can take anywhere from 6 to 8 months. This is all free of charge. So these are people who are giving back to the community to make sure that people who have served their time are reintegrated fully back into the community as full citizens. And so I think that's another issue that we have, along with our segmentation and our silos.
Excellent. Excellent. Let me give everybody one closing minute. And I'm sure you've heard these two phrases of Afro-pessimism versus Afro-futurism, and relate to that because Dr. Fred was not using those terms when he first spoke, but there is this, how do we keep Sankofa centered and not get not dwell in eternal despair. It is not a daily challenge. It's a minute by minute challenge, quite frankly. Want to give everybody like 60 seconds each to kind of chat about where they find that hope. And again, this conversation's been hopeful for me, to say the least, hopeful and helpful. Hafisa, I'll start with you, then Arden and Earl, and I'll give Dr. Fred the last minute. Yeah. Hafisa? No, Hafisa Wind Toure.
Yeah. And thank you all for just your contribution and just what that sparked within me. But I know it's hard to talk about community and building and moving forward without talking about the healing work that has to take place. Say meaningful conversations and meaningful connections. It's not just about proximity. It's not just being in the space together. We have to be very intentional about our interactions and working diligently at our own healing. And I know that's a shift in mindset. And that's one of the things that we focus on. It's a shift in the cultural consciousness, but that the foundation of that is healing. We have generational trauma, shared experiences, a common language that we can speak to, and to be able to take that into a safe space, that we can begin to unpack some of that and open the door for maybe higher levels of support around working through our grief and trauma with, therapy and things of that nature. But to have the tools and to begin those conversations and to normalize the healing that really has to take place, I think is meaningful and impactful and really the center of the work that we're doing.
Perfect. Arden Fire Santana.
Yes, for me, it's lifestyle and will or choice. We show the Afrofuturism and what is who we are through, I think, the way we dress, the opportunities to go through to go to Ghana and bring back clothes that reflect that culture and begin to insinuate those into my wardrobe is becoming important. It's the way we eat, understanding that what we consume physically is the foundation of everything else, and how that that impacts our health. So we choose to be conscious eaters, and we eat to live rather than live to eat. It's in the way we are examples for those who are watching us, even when we don't know we're watching us, including our children. It's the choices that we make about our hair. Yes, you might see me straight, but it's never from a relaxer. It's going to be the most natural way I can do anything that I choose to do it myself, including the makeup I choose to wear. So it's just being very conscious about how it is that we show up in the world. And, I'm in this space now where I don't want to talk about it. I want to be about it. So for me, it's always just in my actions and who I am, and I live by example.
Excellent. Brother Bloodworth.
Yeah, I would just say being intentional is the main thing for me. Whether that's, who am I interacting with, being conscious, as Arden said, about people that may be watching me, just in everything, and knowing that, we are the culture. I saw something just the other day, and it had like 25 different genres of music, and like 20 of them were created by African Americans or Caribbean Americans. So we are the culture, and people may want to partake of it. And it's like the saying goes, they love our rhythms, but not our blues. And we need to be accepting of our own selves more than we are, and provide more grace to each other.
Dr. Fred, just before I come to you, let me just mention that Brother Bloodworth might be joining our hipster society. He may be going on having the hip surgery, and Dr. Fred and I, was it your right or left? Was it your right or left hip, Dr. Fred?
It's my right hip.
Yeah, and right hip for me, and I think it's the right one for you, Earl?
No, it's the left one.
Okay, so we're putting some balance. And also, Dr. Fred, just before I give you the last word, I mentioned Hafisa that Dr. Fred and I, Fred was one of the few people I've seen with the 5-finger shoes. And Hafisa is also a buyer. So I'm just shouting out. I'm just shouting out that our tribe, whether consciously or unconsciously, there's something kicking in. Dr. Fred, please close us out.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's great to be on this panel with you guys. I've learned a lot. I want to continue this, and it's, to me, it's about continuing our education, because even though I'm a senior citizen, I am continuing to learn and have a thirst for learning, and I know that our children do as well. And part of our mission, I think, is to educate our children about their greatness. They are great. They come from greatness. And we have to make that point, because, the frustration that I heard about the public schools, because the public schools don't tell our kids that they're great, and that they are the creators of civilizations, that they created pyramids and medicine and agriculture and science and astronomy and philosophy and politics. They did all of that, but they're not taught that. And so we have to teach our kids that they're great, and build our communities like the great communities that we've built in the past.
Yes.
So that's kind of where I would leave it.
Yes. Okay, this is not a one-off. I think we got a good crew here for another show very, very soon. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy. Happy Juneteenth month. It's Black Men's Health Month. It's Black Music Month. Every month is our month. 24/7, 365. Let's do it. Thank you, everybody.
Good. Thank you all. So glad I got to participate.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.